There are millions of videos online, billions of thumbnails calling for your attention, but somehow you landed here. And maybe you think it was random, a late-night scroll, a curious title, a friend's share. But something deeper knows this wasn't random at all. You clicked because something in you was already listening, not with your ears, but with something quieter. Maybe it was a tension between your brows, a pulse in your chest, a strange calm, like you were remembering something you haven't learned yet. This isn't a video about spectacle. It's not here to impress you. It won't flood your screen with flashes or force answers where mystery belongs. What you're about to hear isn't for the hurried. It's not for the thrill seekers or the ones collecting visions to talk about at parties. It's for the part of you that knows the veil is thinning. The part that's ready, not just to see what's hidden, but to see it without turning away. So if you're still here, listen carefully. The portal is open, and it begins now. You didn't miss the truth. It was filtered from you. Not hidden like a buried treasure, not locked away in a sacred vault, but gently, persistently veiled. Covered by something so subtle, so familiar, you didn't even think to question it. From the very beginning, you were taught to look outward, taught to name, define, compare. You learned how to see the world through the lens of others, what's valuable, what's dangerous, what's real. But no one ever taught you how to see from within. No one told you that your most natural way of perceiving the raw, unfiltered knowing that lives beneath words was real. They didn't have to. The structure took care of that. What's the structure? It's not a person. It's not a government. It's not a secret cult. It's everything that pulls you into distraction. Social norms, education systems, media loops, even well-meaning advice. It's the rhythm of a world that never lets you stop moving long enough to hear your own inner voice. And the most effective part? It's invisible. The veil works not by blocking your vision, but by convincing you there's nothing more to see. You scroll, consume, react. You chase clarity, but rarely find stillness. You gather information, but feel more fragmented than ever. You perform who you are for others and wonder why you don't feel real inside. But maybe you've noticed a crack in the noise. A moment, perhaps fleeting, when something didn't add up. A conversation that felt too scripted. A memory that tugged at something deeper. A silence that felt louder than all the noise combined. These are the moments when the veil flickers, when the structure slips, when your inner vision, the one you were born with but taught to ignore, begins to wake. It's subtle at first, a gentle pressure behind the eyes, a pause between thoughts, a question that won't go away. What if everything I've accepted as real is just the version I was handed? And that question, that's the beginning. Because the veil is not just metaphor, it's a frequency. It's the mental atmosphere that keeps you looping through the same thought patterns, same fears, same definitions of what's possible. To remove it is not to escape the world, but to see it without the filter. To watch the news and feel your own resonance before accepting the narrative. To walk into a room and trust what your body tells you, even if no one else sees it. It is a reorientation. A return to self-trust, a remembering, not of something new, but of something that's always been there beneath the noise, behind the programming, within the silence. And if you're still listening, something inside you has already begun to see through. There's a space you've overlooked your entire life, not because it's far away, but because it's too close. So close, in fact, that you've passed through it hundreds of times a day without ever realizing you were standing at the threshold of something sacred. It's not a place in the physical world. You can't fly to it, map it, or photograph it. It exists in the one moment you're taught to rush past, the silence between your thoughts. That's the portal. Think about the way your mind moves. It hops from memory to plan, judgment to desire, like stepping stones across a fast-moving river. But in between those steps, there's a stillness, a breathless pause, a flicker of nothing. And it's in that nothing, that in-between, that the entire world starts to rearrange. You've been trained to fear emptiness. Silence gets labeled as awkward, blankness as failure. But here's the secret. The most powerful shift in perception doesn't come when you're thinking harder. It comes when thinking stops, even for a second. In that second, space bends, time softens, and awareness expands. You stop perceiving with the mind and begin to see with the inner eye. The ancient mystics knew this. They built entire paths of awakening around that still point between thoughts, not because it's dramatic or dazzling, but because it's real. Undeniably, unshakably real. Here's the invitation, try it now. Close your eyes just for a moment. Don't try to force silence. Let thoughts come, watch them, then wait. Notice the gap, that half second of space before the next thought arrives. Stay there, not by holding, but by relaxing into it, like falling gently into a warm body of water. That space is where perception recalibrates. It's where seeing shifts from the eyes to the soul. It's where the veil begins to lift, not all at once, but just enough for the truth to shimmer through. This isn't about becoming a monk or meditating for hours. This is about reclaiming the space inside you that's always been available, always been sacred, and always been enough. And the more often you visit it, the more it reveals. Because once you see from there, you can never fully unsee again. You've been searching outside for a place that only exists within. Some call it the sacred space, others the stillpoint, but the mystics had another name for it, the inner temple. This temple isn't built from stone. It has no altar, no icons, no language. And yet, it holds more power than any external ritual ever could. Because it's made of silence. Not the kind you force, but the kind that arises naturally like mist settling over a lake before dawn. You don't need to become someone else to enter it. You don't even need to believe in anything. You only need one thing: to be here, with your breath, with your body, with no intention to change what is. Let's begin now, not as a technique, but as a return. Sit gently. Let your hands rest wherever they feel most natural. Close your eyes if it feels safe. Begin by noticing the rhythm of your breath, not changing it, not controlling it, just watching, like greeting an old friend you didn't know you'd missed. Inhale and notice the pause at the top. Exhale and feel the ground beneath you. Stay with it. Each breath is a key. Each pause is a doorway. And in the space between each one, something quiet begins to emerge. You may feel nothing at first, or perhaps a soft warmth behind your chest. A subtle stillness behind the noise. That is the temple. It has no agenda. It doesn't ask you to be enlightened or perfect. It welcomes you as you are tired, restless, hopeful, unsure. All of you is allowed. And here's the truth. Every clear vision, every inner knowing, every moment of true perception starts here. Not with effort, but with surrender. Because until you feel safe inside your own presence, every insight will feel like a burst, fleeting, unsustainable. But when you learn to dwell here, even just for moments at a time, the seeing begins to root. It stabilizes. It becomes a way of being. This temple isn't a reward, it's your origin. It's what was there before the world told you who to be, and each time you return, it remembers you. Some doors don't need to be kicked open. They open in stillness with presence, with breath, with care. The inner eye, the seat of perception beyond words, was never meant to be forced. It doesn't respond to control. It responds to reverence. And there is a practice, a simple one, ancient in its essence, subtle in its unfolding. It is not a trick or a shortcut. It is a remembering, and it begins with 7 breaths. This is not visualization. You're not asked to imagine light, colors, or symbols. You're only asked to feel, to return again and again to the simple act of being here fully. Let's begin now. Find a quiet space. Let your spine be soft but upright. Rest your hands, close your eyes if you wish, and prepare to enter not a new place, but a deeper layer of where you already are. Breath 1, inhale gently through the nose. Exhale slowly through the mouth. Let the surface fall away. Let the world be distant. Let the breath be all there is. Breath 2, feel the center of your forehead, not to think about it, but to sense it, as if awareness is softly pooling there. Breath 3, notice the subtle warmth, the slight pressure like a fingertip resting between the brows. Not imagined, just felt. Let it be what it is. Breath 4, as you inhale, feel the air touching the back of your throat. As you exhale, notice the space expanding inside you, like something sacred being carved open with each breath. Breath 5, if thoughts come, let them pass. You don't need to fix, chase, or stop them. Your presence is enough. The breath is the guide. Breath 6, you may feel a wave of calm sweep downward from forehead to chest, from chest to belly. It's not dramatic, it's real, it's subtle, and that's its power. Breath 7, everything is quiet now. You're not looking for visions, you're not searching for signs, you're simply here, awake, anchored, listening. That is the key. Not to reach for the third eye, but to settle so deeply into the moment that it naturally begins to open. Like a flower blooming at dawn, not because someone told it to, but because the conditions were finally right. And when it does, it may begin with the smallest sensation, a tingle, a pulse, a knowing. Trust it. Let it grow. Not as an achievement, but as a return to the clarity that has always lived inside you. You were never meant to go blind through life. You were meant to see not just with your eyes, but with your whole being. Not everything behind the veil is light. That's the first truth no one tells you when your inner vision begins to stir, when you finally start seeing what was hidden. You imagine beauty, clarity, revelations. And yes, they're there. But so is something else. The things you left behind. Not in the world, but in yourself. When the veil begins to fall not all at once, but slowly, breath by breath, it doesn't just reveal cosmic patterns or sacred truths. It reveals the parts of you that were exiled, the memories that felt too heavy, the decisions you pretend never happened, the beliefs that silently shaped your life from the shadows. Sometimes it's a moment you've buried. A conversation that changed you more than you realized. A choice that left a mark. And suddenly, there it is, not as a thought, but as a full-body knowing. It surfaces in silence. It arrives without asking, and it looks you in the eye. This is where many turn back. Because awakening isn't just about expanding your perception, it's about being willing to sit with what you see, without fixing it, without analyzing, without running away, just being with it. There's a kind of courage required here. Not the kind that fights dragons, but the kind that sits still when your instinct says to run. A courage that stays soft. That says, yes, I see you now, and I'm not leaving. When the forgotten rises, you might feel an ache behind your chest. You might cry without knowing why. You might feel a pull to forgive someone or yourself. Let it come. Let it move through. This isn't about reliving the past. It's about welcoming home the parts of you that have waited in silence for years, decades, even. And here's what's important. Do not chase this moment like a thrill. This is not an adrenaline technique. It is not a shortcut to mysticism. It is a sacred meeting with yourself. When you approach it with reverence, the truth that reveals itself won't shatter you. It will soften you. It will begin the healing you didn't know you were waiting for. Because real seeing isn't loud. It's quiet. But once it happens, it changes everything. And you'll never want to go back to not knowing again. As your inner vision sharpens, something unexpected happens. You begin to see more, but not all of it is true. That's the spiritual trap. The one no one talks about when you first awaken. The more sensitive you become, the more open your perception grows, the more vulnerable you are to illusions that feel just as vivid, just as powerful as truth. Because the mind is clever. It knows how to wrap old fears in sacred clothing. It knows how to turn emotional patterns into messages. It knows how to speak in symbols that feel profound, but are really echoes of what hasn't healed. So how do you tell the difference? How do you know if what you're seeing is real or just another layer of the veil disguised in spiritual form? The answer begins not in your mind, but in your body. Sign 1. Disconnection from the present. When the insight feels urgent, overwhelming, or pulls you out of your body, pause. Real truth doesn't rush. It arrives with stillness, not panic. It roots you deeper, not higher. Sign 2. Self-centered grandiosity. If your vision makes you feel superior, chosen, or isolated from others, it's likely an ego loop dressed as insight. True wisdom humbles you. It connects you, not separates you. Sign 3. Compulsion instead of clarity. If you feel driven to act quickly, obsessively interpret symbols, or constantly seek confirmation, it may not be inner truth. Real knowing is quiet. It doesn't need to convince you. When you notice these signs, the most powerful thing you can do is return. Return to your breath, to the ground beneath your feet, to the sensation of your hands in your lap. The body is the anchor. Always. It doesn't lie, doesn't dramatize. It just is. And in that simple presence, illusions lose their grip. You begin to feel what's real again. This is why many wisdom traditions emphasize grounding as much as ascension. Not because the heights aren't real, but because without roots, even the clearest vision becomes distorted. So the next time an insight shakes you, or a vision dazzles you, or a message arrives in dream or symbol, ask, does this pull me out of my center or bring me home to it? You are the gatekeeper now. Your awareness is sacred. Guard it well, not with fear, but with discernment. Not to reject what's new, but to welcome only what's true. And sometimes that means closing your eyes, just long enough to open them again from the inside. So much of the spiritual journey feels like an ascent into silence, into mystery, into the subtle realms behind the veil. But at some point, you have to come back. Not to forget what you saw, but to live it. That's the real art. Not just awakening, but integrating. Not just glimpsing inner vision, but walking through your day with that vision still alive, still steady. Still awake while bills need paying, dishes need washing, children cry, and traffic honks. Here's the thing no one tells you. The sacred doesn't disappear when life gets loud. It just gets quieter. And your job is to remember it's still there. So how do you live from inner vision when the world is pulling you in 10 directions at once? You pause, a simple pause, 5 seconds. That's all. 5 seconds to breathe before speaking. 5 seconds to feel your feet before reacting. 5 seconds to place your hand gently over your chest, not for show, not for drama, but as a signal to your nervous system. I'm still here. You look not with analysis, but with presence. You let the world be what it is: messy, raw, unpredictable, without letting it unseat the clarity inside you. It's not about being perfect. It's about remembering, reorienting, returning again and again to the place in you that already knows. And sometimes that means saying less. Sometimes it means noticing the tension in your jaw, unclenching, and choosing not to spiral. Sometimes it means recognizing a pattern, smiling at it, and choosing differently, not because you have to, but because now you can. Living from inner vision isn't about glowing all the time or walking around like you're in a trance. It's about being here fully, feeling life without being swallowed by it, seeing clearly without losing your softness. And when you forget, which you will, it's about returning with compassion instead of shame. Because the point of inner sight was never escape, it was embodiment. And the light you saw, it's not meant to stay in the silence. It's meant to walk with you, into meetings, into conversations, into difficult moments and small joys, into every corner of your life. That's the real miracle. Not that you awakened, but that you chose to stay awake. Right here, in this ordinary, extraordinary world. If you've made it this far, something real has already stirred inside you. You don't need to name it. You don't need to explain it to anyone, not even to yourself. Just notice the stillness that's now with you. The quiet shift. The breath that feels a little deeper. That's all the proof you need. This was never about becoming someone new. It was about returning to what's always been here. You don't have to declare anything. You don't have to chase more light. Let what you've touched today keep moving quietly within you. Let it soften your voice, your pace, your choices. Let it be enough. And when you're ready, there is more. Not to overwhelm, not to achieve, but to keep unfolding like the next breath. Your path continues, and we'll be here, waiting, not to teach you, but to walk beside you whenever you choose to look inward again.